we on? All right, good afternoon and welcome back for those of you who were here this morning with our Bar Advisory Group meeting. I want to welcome you to a public workshop. My name is Patrick DeRay, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and we always try to combine a workshop opportunity in conjunction with our advisory group meetings. So as I mentioned this morning and early part of this afternoon, we had our first of the calendar year 2023 quarterly meetings of our advisory group, and we have been asked if we would be willing to host a workshop dealing with a topic that was of importance to the automotive repair industry. And normally our workshops deal with regulations that we're working on, and we want to vet them and get input from our stakeholders, including the auto repair industry. This time, this is not a regulation that we're going to be vetting or reviewing. We are in pretty good shape with all of our pending regulation packages. But this workshop is dedicated to a topic that was brought to our attention by members of the automotive repair industry and advisory group members, most notably Johan Gallo sitting to my left up here on the dais, who represents the California Automotive Business Coalition, but others as well who were concerned about the ability of automotive repair dealers, registrants here in California who are engaged in automotive repair, and having electronic transactions, which we have definitely provided for with our regulations, and moving away from the paper age that we all once were so accustomed to the more digital electronic age of all business transactions, whether you're buying a home or buying a car or anything. Everything's gone digital and electronic. So we didn't want to be the sole exception out there as it relates to the regulation of this industry, and I wanted to make sure we accommodated for that and have provided for electronic transactions to meet with our laws and regulations with a regulation change that was done several years back. But along with that has come some point-of-sale systems or software systems that are being used by the automotive repair industry that don't necessarily observe. We don't license or regulate the software providers. We license and regulate the automotive repair industry. And so some of these systems are built kind of as a one-size-fits-all with all 50 states in mind, all jurisdictions, without any necessary focus on California laws and regulations. We like to think of California as leading the way. In fact, I'm not even aware of another Bureau of Automotive Repair in existence in the United States. There are local jurisdictions within certain counties that I've heard of, and Dade County, Florida, or some jurisdiction within the state of Michigan. I've heard bits and pieces about that, but no one who does consumer protection in automotive repair transactions like the Bureau of Automotive Repair here in the state of California. We have a very comprehensive set of laws and regulations that have been on the books for 50-plus years now, or the initial legislation, the Automotive Repair Act, was chaptered in 1971. Bringing into the existence in 1972, the following year, that act and the Bureau of Automotive Repair's authorization to enforce that act and all regulations tied to it. So we have some very specific requirements that I'm sure are going to be unique from other states that probably don't have anything on the books in many cases. So we'd like to see, obviously, some progress in helping our registrants in their abilities to comply with our various laws and regulations. So we have scheduled this workshop, invited representatives from the software community that are providing these systems for the automotive repair dealers that are registered in California. These came to us by way of a list that was assembled by California Automotive Business Coalition. I think they had representatives attending the SEMA show in November in Vegas, and other venues where this information could be gathered. We took that information, compiled that list that was provided to us, and forwarded the invitation to attend today's workshop to all of those software providers. It's not an exhaustive list. There may be others that we're not aware of. We kind of rely on those using these systems to provide that information to us. So we're hoping that there are some representatives of these the software systems that are either in the room attending today or attending virtually. Just a couple of introductions before we turn it over to our presenter, and then we'll open it up for public comment after that. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we are webcasting today's meeting. That means that it is being recorded and will be available on the Bureau's website in about a week's time frame. Now,
I apologize.
Do I have to say everything I just got done saying? I need a recording
Apologies.
to do all of that, and I don't have one, it sounds like. All right, well, we do the best we can. Anyway, yes. So like it sounds like we'll have a recording. I'm not sure of how much of what I've said at the opening will be on that recording, but we will make that available next week. We also, our participation, these meetings are now a hybrid format where we are allowing for in-person participation to continue going back to the way we were pre-pandemic, but also recognizing there's an opportunity to further expand our abilities to participate remotely, which we discovered while experiencing and living with the pandemic, and how to continue doing business operations when we were unable to meet in person. So we have a remote option via WebEx, which allows folks to participate. So hopefully that workshop, notice that we forwarded it to all the software vendors. We'll see a bunch of them participating remotely. So we have a moderator who will facilitate some of that public participation remotely. Tricia St. Clair, thank you, Tricia, for helping us on behalf of the Department of Consumer Affairs. Bryce Penny here is in the room. He's one of our IT expert in the room that can help us with any of the glitches that we're experiencing with the screens or monitors here. And then Zach Richardson, also from the Bureau's executive office, is co-moderator to help Tricia out with any issues. I think that's it. We have several of the Bar Advisory Group members who are sitting on the dais here. When they have a chance or an opportunity to speak after the presentation, I'll kindly remind them to introduce the association, and for that matter, anyone from the public who comes to the table to make a comment, please introduce not just your name, but the association or organization that you're representing. And that should do it. And please silence or put on vibrate mode your cell phones just to minimize the disruptions. And now, joining us for a presentation, this is more focused on the laws and regulations as it relates to estimate, authorization, and invoice requirements, and other what I call paperwork requirements of the Automotive Repair Act. These are kind of where the rubber meets the road, when the transactions occurring between the shop and the consumer, and all the requirements that are really based on making sure that there's an informed consumer who's aware of what's being done to their vehicle and authorizing the work to their vehicle. So these are the protections that have been put in place and have been on the books for 50 years, and with some modifications along the way certainly as we need to modify based on experiences and the need to improve our regulation of the industry, or allowing for electronic transactions to occur and recognizing that they exist. Those modifications happened as well not too long ago. So, but for the most part, these have remained unchanged for the last since they were initially chaptered in 1971. Joining us, Garrett McHenry with the Sacramento Field Office. He's co-located with the Bureau's headquarters out in Ranch Cordova, to be more precise, and he's going to give an update presentation that it's kind of a pared down, what we call a Write It Right presentation, and that's two spellings of right, the W-R-I-G-H-T, and then the R-I-G-H-T spelling. W-R-I-T-E and R-A-G-H-T, sorry. I spelled it the same way both times. It's because we want to make sure it's written right. And we've put out a document that's available on our website called Write It Right. It's a guidance document. There's a hard copy that also can be obtained. I'm not sure if we brought any copies of that with us today, but it is a point of emphasis in making sure that the consumer is well informed and making sure that the automotive repair dealers are well informed and educated about the expectations to keep their customers informed each and every step of the way of that transaction. So we're going to do a pared down, what I want to call Write It Right presentation from Garrett, and then after that we'll open it up for questions and comments and actual concerns from the automotive repair industry, if there are some, about specific areas where maybe some of these software systems may fall short of the requirements of the automotive repair dealer and their expectations to comply with all laws and regulations. Garrett, sorry about the lengthy introduction, but I wanted to preface and make sure everybody knew why we were meeting today.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Patrick. And I did bring some Write It Right pamphlets, the most latest recent version that we have. It's on the back table. I've got about 15 or 20 pamphlets if someone would like to grab one on the way out. Going to the next slide, the very first slide, in regards to the topics that we'll be discussing today, we are going to be defining the customer, talking about the designation form requirements in use, estimates, authorizations, work orders, invoices, record retention requirements, and Write It Right. And for some of the shop owners or shop managers that are here, this is something that we provide free to the body shops. We generally try and encourage them to do it every maybe year and a half or two, depending on how much new staff that they have that they need to inform of the latest laws and regs. On to the next slide.
Not just body shops, but all automotive repair dealers. I think you said auto body shops.
That's correct. I'm sorry. And I am specifically in the auto body department in the enforcement office here in Rancho Cordova in Sacramento, but this pertains to any automotive repair dealer. As far as defining the customer is the person presenting a motor vehicle for repair and authorizing the repairs to that motor vehicle. It does not have to be particularly the registered owner of that vehicle. The customer may designate in writing another person to authorize additional repairs at the time the initial authorization to proceed is signed. However, that person shall not be the automotive repair dealer or insurer involved in a claim for auto body repairs. Go to the next slide, please. The designation form requirements in use. A designation form designates another person to authorize additional repairs not estimated or parts not included in the initial estimate. The designation may be either a separate form or incorporated into the ARD's work order. A designation form is needed when the individual presenting the vehicle for repairs is only authorizing the initial estimate of repair and when the additional repairs or approvals are being authorized by another individual. The following information must be listed on the designation form: the name of the designated person, the designated person's contact information, the customer's signature, the date of signing, the work order number. Designation cannot be the ARD providing repair services, the insurer involved in a claim on the vehicle being repaired, or any employee, agent, or persons acting on behalf of the ARD or insured. If we can go to the next slide, please, and just one more slide. In reference to estimates, an estimate is a paper or electronic document provided to the customer that contains an estimated price for parts and labor for a specific job. Next slide. Estimate requirements. An estimate must contain a description of the specific job and the estimated price for all parts and labor. An auto body or collision repair estimate must be itemized and contain the same information that is required in a standard estimate. The estimate also must include any charges associated with the handling, management, and disposal cost of toxic or hazardous waste related to the repair. Whether any parts replaced are to be returned to the customer if requested by the customer at the time the estimate is authorized. Next slide. Parts descriptions. Each part listed in the estimate shall be new unless specifically identified as a used, rebuilt, or reconditioned part. Replacement crash parts. Each new replacement crash part listed in an auto body or collision repair estimate must be an original equipment manufacturer, OEM, crash part unless specifically identified as a non-OEM aftermarket crash part. Part descriptions such as LKQ, QRP, Opt OEM, Alt OEM, and the likes are not defined in statute or regulation and cannot be used when describing parts on an estimate or invoice. Teardown estimate. This is one of three, and this gets somewhat lengthy where we may need to discuss this further in talks. It is necessary to tear down a vehicle or if it is necessary to tear down a vehicle or a vehicle component in order to diagnose, the automotive repair dealer shall do all of the following. Estimate of teardown. The ARD shall first give the customer an estimate for the teardown and obtain authorization for the teardown. The estimate shall include the following: the cost of reassembly the vehicle or component, the cost of all parts and labor necessary to replace items that are normally destroyed by teardown of the vehicle or component, such as gaskets, seals, and O-rings. Next slide. Number 2 of 3 for teardown estimates. If applicable, notification that the act of teardown might prevent the restoration of the vehicle or component to the condition in which it was provided by the customer. The maximum time it will take the ARD to reassemble the vehicle or component in the event the customer elects not to proceed with the repair or maintenance of the vehicle. The ARD shall reassemble the vehicle or component within the time period specified in the teardown estimate. The maximum time shall be counted from the date of authorization of the teardown. And the third portion of our section in regards to teardown estimates is the shop is to provide itemized estimate for repair after teardown. Upon completion of the teardown, the ARD shall give the customer an itemized estimate for labor and parts necessary for the required repair. The ARD shall then obtain the customer's authorization for either repair or reassembly before any further diagnosis or repair is done or charges accrue. Documentation for declined repair reassembly. If after teardown a customer declines repair or reassembly, the ARD shall, as applicable, document on the teardown invoice that the customer declined repair or reassembly. On the topic of authorization, authorization is the customer's consent for a specific job expressed as either a written signature on the estimate authorizing a specific job, a statement communicated either orally or electronically to the automotive repair dealer and documented on the estimate authorizing a specific job. Electronic, relating to technology having electrical, digital, magnetic, wireless, optical, electromagnetic, or similar capabilities. Example would be fax, email, or text. And of course, authorization orally, which would be voice communication, whether in person, by telephone, or by an electronic manner where voice can be heard. Obtaining additional authorizations. Prepare a revised work order that describes all additional parts and labor. Contact the customer by phone, email, text, or other electronic means. Properly document the customer's authorization on both the work order and invoice to include the following. The 6 elements that we need to notate on the shop's paperwork would be the date and time of the additional authorization, the name of the person who authorized the additional repairs, telephone number or email address contacted, description of all additional parts and labor, cost for additional parts and labor, and total price for all repairs. Sublet work requirements and responsibilities. Sublet repairs can be performed with the consent of the consumer. The ARD must include with the estimate a statement of any sublet repair to be performed on the vehicle. The ARD is responsible for all sublet repairs in the same manner as if they had performed the repairs themselves. At the request of the customer, the name and location of the facility performing the sublet repairs must be disclosed. Work orders. A work order is a paper or electronic document that contains the authorized estimate for a specific job, the repairs requested by the customer, and the vehicle's odometer reading. And finally, an invoice, which is a paper or electronic document provided to the customer upon completion of all repairs that contains the final price for parts and labor for a specific job. Invoice requirements. ARD registration number and corresponding business name and address as shown in Bureau records. Separately list, describe, and identify all of the following: all service and repairs performed, including diagnosis or warranty repairs, and the prices for each part supplied in such a manner that the consumer can understand what was purchased and the price for each part. Part description requirements are the same as the estimates. Invoice requirements 2 of 3. The subtotal price for all service and repair work, labor. The subtotal price for all parts supplied, excluding sales tax. The applicable sales tax, and the total cost for all labor, parts, and applicable sales tax. Invoice requirements 3 of 3. Separate billing in an invoice for items generically noted as shop supplies, miscellaneous parts, fees for electronic communication with the SMOG database, and the like, is prohibited. A customer's declination of repair or reassembly after teardown shall be documented by an ARD on the teardown invoice. Replaced parts that cannot be returned to a customer shall be documented by an ARD on the invoice per CCR Regulations 3355. The ARD shall, The ARD shall give the customer a legible copy of the invoice. Next slide. Additional invoice requirements. Unusual circumstances. If a vehicle was dropped off under unusual circumstances per CCR section 3353.2 before or after business hours or towed to a shop without customer during business hours, the ARD shall record the following additional information on the invoice: the date and time, and the authorization of the estimate, the name of the person who gave the authorization, and the telephone number or electronic mail address contacted, if any, to obtain the authorization. Number 2 of 3 for additional invoice requirements, exceeding original estimate. If additional authorization was obtained per CCR section 3354A, exceeding original estimate, and the authorization was provided orally or electronically, the ARD shall record the following additional information on the invoice: the date and time of the additional authorization, the name of the person who authorized the additional repairs, the telephone number or electronic mail address contacted, if any, to obtain the additional authorization, and a description of all additional parts and labor, the cost of the additional parts and labor, and the total price for all repairs. If the customer provided additional authorization orally, the ARD may, instead of documenting the information described in CCR California Code of Regulations 3356E1, obtain the customer's signature or initials on a statement acknowledging notice and consent to the additional repairs, parts, labor, and total revised cost. The statement shall be as follows. I acknowledge notice and oral approval of an increase in the original estimated price, followed by getting the signature or initials from the consumer. Records retention requirements. The following records must be maintained in either written or electronic form. All invoices, all estimates, including all records, such as emails or text, created to obtain the customer's authorization, all work orders, including all records supplementing the work order created to obtain additional authorization from the customer. In addition to records retention requirements, records must be maintained for at least 3 years and shall be open for reasonable inspection and or reproduction by bar during normal business hours. All records associated with a specific job must have a unique identifier linking the records to that specific job. And as I had mentioned, we do have some copies or pamphlets in the back table on the Write It Right pamphlet, as well as the electronic version that you can find on the website as well. I have some business cards if you need to reach out in terms of setting up a Write It Right. We can reach out to the local office in that area and speak with one of the soups within that office.
All right, thank you very much, Garrett, for the presentation and overview of the kind of the key laws and regulations that are kind of the foundation of the Automotive Repair Act. Again, as I said, going back 50 years and remaining pretty much unchanged to the present day. I want to open it up for comments and questions. Mr. Gallo, since you were kind of the spearheaded this effort and the reason why we're meeting today and this presentation, I'd like to turn it over to you first.
I appreciate that. Just by way of background, Chief DeRay and I had a lot of conversation about software issues having related to repair orders, estimates, final invoices, and the risks that a lot of our members, not just Cal ABC, but other members, so with the California Automotive Business Coalition, the other associations that we work with, and others in the industry we work with, there was a real concern that with Cite and Find coming, we have a lot of software that puts a business at risk. And they were concerned that while we have these software providers doing what they do, the business gets that software, they're trying to do everything they can to comply with the Write It Right, but that doesn't always happen. So what I want to do is, and Chief DeRay and I talked a little bit before the start of the meeting, is kind of give you a little bit of background to explain what we're talking about and why it's of concern. Some of the real issues that our members are seeing is parts descriptions, as an example. They don't provide total disclosure as we look at the Write It Right and the requirements under Write It Right. Labor descriptions are often truncated because there's a limited number of characters that you can put on a line. Even if you drop down a line, you can't put all the descriptions. And the way the software companies have designed it, they're not in compliance with the Write It Right as we know it. Jargon is another problem that we face, where you have R&R instead of remove and replace, reman instead of remanufacturers, and the list of abbreviations goes on, so I won't belabor that point. Other problems that we're seeing is you get the initial estimate, you get the customer to sign it, you do a revision, software in the marketplace today overwrites all of that, and it makes it appear the revised estimate is your first estimate, and you've lost all the history. We have a member that spent several months fighting with a major company over this, only be told that it's not a problem, and if California has a problem with it, that's their problem, not ours. Well, I'm sorry. We're in California. We're trying to comply with the law. It is a problem. We have situations where the initials, the signatures, all the things that the customer did at the onset of the work order have been lost. Right now, we look at our membership, we have independents, we have franchisees, we have chain stores. Jerry Froelich and I worked with Auto Advisory Services and did a lot of car dealer compliance audits. The attitude at car dealerships was, well, Mercedes isn't going to write a new software program to comply with California. BMW is not going to do it, and the list goes on. So the real concern that we had is going back to the whole issue of cite and fine and the risks that businesses feel that if we're looking at something as basic as the write it right, and we're using a software package that is not in compliance, then the business is at risk. Not the software companies, not the manufacturers, not anybody else. It's the business that ultimately will bear the burden of any types of violations of that. We've always had the belief that when we're doing invoices, when we're doing work orders, repair orders, whatever the customer leaves with is what should be in your system. It should be a mirror image, so when BAR comes in and wants 3 years of records and they push that up against what the consumer has, those two should match. And if they don't, there's a problem. That's another major problem we have with the software companies. When we look at all of these things in totality, and we try and back out of it and say, okay, what's realistic? Well, I think Chief Duraya and I agreed that the most simplistic thing is we have a write it right. The write it right has evolved over time. If anybody is going to provide software in California as a mere basis, it should comply with the write it right. And so that's what really brought us here today. The last issue I'll leave you with, we talked to members that have switched software providers. BAR shows up, they want the last 3 years' records. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not available anymore. We have a new software vendor. Then they go to that software vendor and say, oh no, we don't have those records anymore. So now all of a sudden you're not in compliance with the 3-year retention when it's really the outside provider who was providing that service that no longer provides it to you. And so I've given you a lot of information right now. I'm going to be happy to send that all to the chief to summarize it all. But I think those of us in the audience today, I appreciate our members, Kyle Fowler and the others that went to the SEMA show, that went to Auto Industry Week and went around and collected all the various business cards from all the different software providers that were there. So we could give you a comprehensive list of anybody and everybody, including the work that Jack did and the others working with people, because we really tried to get a comprehensive list of all those that provide software in California. But in the end, if we can't have compliance with what the BAR requires as a write it right, that should be ground zero for any software provider in California to do business in California, providing systems for businesses. So I know I went rather long, but I wanted to give the history of all the work that Chief DeRay and I and all those in the room have been working on to really figure out what's this going to look like in the future. And if we're not going to look at cite and fine right now, specifically for these types of infractions, that day can come. And that's a concern to our industry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Johan. It's Johan Gallo with the California Automotive Business Coalition, or CalABC. Additional comments? Bud Rice?
Hi, Bud Rice here. Garrett, thank you very much for your presentation. Couple other things. If I could ask, with a raise of hands, are there any software manufacturers that are in the crowd today? Anybody who's okay, so we have one over here. Okay, so love to get your comments here as we're going along here. Okay, any feedback you can give us. We're really trying to put our concerns out and hoping for feedback as we're going along. I also think this is just the first opening salvo of what's going to happen probably in a number of sessions that we're going to have over time. As Johan was laying out what our concerns are, one of the big concerns is replication. In other words, if you've got somebody that's writing an invoice and they make an error, you can go talk to them about the fact that they've made that error and maybe train them and say, well, here's what you should have said, you said that, or maybe they used a synonym or a shortcut, and you say, no, you got to write it out because nobody knows what that means. And over time, you kind of get yourself around over that. If you've got an automated software system that is making a mistake, it compounds dramatically because they're all wrong. Okay, it's not one guy made a mistake, they're all wrong. So we got to figure out how to make sure that whatever the components are going to be to match up to write it right, that the approved vendor list, which is really what we'd like to see. We'd like to see, here are the things that a software system needs to do, and you did a nice job of laying it out. I think we have to format it in a way that can be easy to comprehend for somebody to look at. And then here are the possible vendors that may be able to offer that solution to the California market. And here's the ones that we think meet that criteria, and here's the ones that haven't. Not that they don't, but they haven't yet met that criteria. And so these are ones that shops may want to take a look at as a solution for themselves. Earlier today, there was I think Clay was talking about the hand scanners that are out there now for the new smog equipment. And what he said was, we have a list of 3 approved vendors that have the piece of hardware that you can get for your hand scanner. So if you want to be in the smog check business and you want to have a hand scanner to do smog checks, here's 3 vendors that can sell you that piece of equipment. That's exactly what we'd like to see happen over here, that we have people that can match that criteria that we can hopefully select from. So this isn't a small problem. This is a big problem that over time, as things have become more electronic moving forward, and like Johan was saying, yeah, what do you do if you're working with these guys and they do backups and they're doing all that, and you end up moving to somebody else, you cancel your subscription with them, so they might wait 30 days and then delete all your data, because why are they going to hang on to it? And now here comes Bar saying, hey, you had this customer, 18 months ago, we'd like to see their invoice, and we go, uh-oh. And in the old days, you can go grab a box, and in that box had all these old invoices. Well, where's the box? There's no box. So I think somehow we got to figure out how to move into the new age of today, but not lose capabilities in the process. So I think that's where we're trying to go here, and that's why we're taking up some time here. So
and if I may add a comment to some of those concerns that you have. It's been an ongoing challenge over the years. I've been with the department almost 10 years, specifically with the body shops and naming parts and how they can name parts, because you have the challenge of the insurance company that is requesting that they word it a certain way to kind of score on their alternate part usage, which we understand. I mean, our job isn't to go into body shops and try and close them down because of the verbiage that they're limited to using to the program. But we have, very aggressively over the years asked them to get with the software companies, because in this day and age, we just feel that, number one, California is the biggest automotive repair state in the nation. And for the companies or the software companies to dismiss the fact that maybe there needs to be a change to make the system a little bit more workable, where they can manipulate and be compliant in how they're describing parts, but at the same time pleasing the insurance company, however that may be, we just still are kind of scratching our head why that can't be done in this day and age. And so I think it can be done. I think the workaround that I've seen over the years, specifically in the body shops, is they'll import the estimate using the estimating software, but then, and this is more so with the bigger shops, they'll have a management system where they can go in and make those changes, whereby that final invoice or that document is being compliant in the way that they're describing parts, and what we see as far as what we count under the statute of what the descriptions of parts are. As far as records retention, we know that sometimes these shops and dealerships do switch software programs, but they're still responsible for either printing a hard copy and putting it somewhere, or scanning it and putting it on a disk. We can't accept that as being an excuse. If they say, well, we switched companies and sorry, we just don't have anything past the last 9 months. If they knew that they were going to make that business change, they're still required to maintain those records, however they do it. And we understand that sometimes there's some glitches, and it's not necessarily the intent or their fault, but we certainly take the time to educate them in the best way to be compliant, and we're always there as a resource to tell them how, how being compliant is so important to, we want to educate them, we want to be a resource, and we're constantly doing that. It's come to the point where it's just a little bit of a challenge with the software companies, and I think we're right around that corner where they're going to be able to accommodate that, hopefully, to be more compliant.
Jack Maladona with the California Auto Body Association.
Thank you for the presentation, Garrett. Appreciate it. It's interesting because I saw a movie, I've seen it like 50 times, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the Clint Eastwood movie, and this is kind of where we are with the software programs, right? There's some software programs, what I call, the good ones. Those are the ones that have taken the time to read the laws and regulations and work with the BAR, work with the associations, and try to comply as best they can with their software program. Then you have the ones sort of the bad. I mean, they're right in the middle there. They're trying to, they're doing a few things, but not, not enough. And then you got the ugly, and the ones I categorize in the ugly are the ones, the software companies that are point-of-sale companies that are out of state. They're working on restaurant or fast food point-of-sale programs, and I'm like, hey, look, let's do an automotive software program, right? And they just put something together. They have no clue what's going on in California. And some of those programs, I know Johan listed some of the issues, but some of the issues that I've seen with some of those programs on the mechanical side is that they may pre-populate, certain items on the line item, for example, shop supplies. Mm-hmm. And you can shop in other states, that's fine, but here in California, it's specifically prohibited. Mm-hmm. But some shops may not know that, right? And it just pops up and they just charge, and that would be obviously a violation. That's just one example of the many that have been listed so far. So my thought on this is that somehow the good ones need to be recognized in some way. And I don't know exactly how we do it, but that would be a good thing for the automotive repair industry. So they, again, the marketplace would, if that's out there, shops would start using the good programs, right, and stay away from the bad and the ugly. And that would maybe give an incentive to some of those other programs to say, hey, we need to comply. Not sure how we do it, because I know very well that the BAR does not have authority over the software companies. That's correct. Can't force them to do anything. But maybe, in terms of, as we're discussing this in terms of solutions, because we've kind of, identified some of the issues here, is maybe that some of these software programs need to have some sort of training or write it right, so they understand what the laws are. If they're going to be selling these products, they should be at least aware of what's going on to try to incorporate these in their programs. But I do want to, point out there are some good software companies out there. We can't have a broad brush to throw them all under the bus. And I'm just not sure how we recognize the good ones. But anyway, I'm just throwing that out in terms of comments and some ideas out there. Thank you.
Pat, Dave Kusa is online.
Getting there. No. Thank you for the comments so far. We do have those who are listening in via the WebEx. Dave Kusa with the Automotive Service Councils of California.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this opportunity. So, since our last meeting when we were talking about this, I've used a couple of software providers in the past, and both have been California compliant. Or I use one now and one in the past that are compliant. I've looked at some others that are compliant. So perhaps a solution for this would be to create, because it's so, if they aren't compliant, it's very difficult for them to become compliant if they haven't written their software in that fashion. If they are compliant, it's pretty easy to demonstrate that they are. So perhaps we can have some sort of voluntary certification that, through BAR, that the companies can, say, hey, we work, here it is, here's how it works. And an expert at the BAR can say, yep, you're right. You are compliant, and here's your stamp of approval, so that we shop owners going forward don't get caught in in the ignorant trap of not even knowing they're not compliant, because the company that I use, if you do it correctly, it's very compliant. It is possible to do it incorrectly, through ignorance, and it won't be compliant, even though we think it might be. So maybe that's a solution for, or at least initial step for a solution for our problem.
Thank you for that comment. Garrett, did you have a response, or? Oh.
I don't think we'll ever be able to certify or bless a particular program per se, but we are here to maybe see an example, see how that invoice is, and if it is compliant and all the things that it needs to have. But we would say, I would suggest to use that as an example, whether you go to the software company and say, BAR says this is acceptable based on what it has, but I don't think we'll ever be able to certify any particular software company or bless the way that something's done, but we will certainly just let them know, where the shortcomings are, or if it's something that's definitely meeting the requirements and how it's written or described.
Thank you. Additional comments? Actually, before I go there, I did want to add that we recognize how important this issue is to the automotive repair industry. Earlier today, I gave a presentation at our advisory group meeting about an operational review that is going to be conducted of the Bureau this year. A report was submitted on January 3rd to the legislature. It's what they call our sunset review that's done every 4 years. Now it's been extended to a 5th year because of delays in getting to some of those reviews for other programs during the pandemic. So we highlighted this as a major issue, and it may be one that the legislature wishes to address in some fashion with, who knows, legislation perhaps, but that'll be out of my hands. But we did put it before them. We didn't want to sweep it under the rug and not have it be called to their attention. Other comments or questions from anyone either in the room or via WebEx? I'm looking down at my screen. Jerry Froelich, and then we'll take you next. Please introduce yourself and your organization.
Jerry Froelich, JBS Consulting, also with Cal ABC. Obviously, I used to work with the Bureau. I left 10 years ago. One of the things I see with a lot of the repair order systems, and they believe, yeah, it's there. Okay, a little closer. They believe the system's there because it has all of them, all the information, shall we say. An example I know of one system, you've got the authorization signature, and here's the block, and has all the statement on it. Got some more stuff on it, but when they sign on the tablet, it's way down below here. It doesn't even go in where that signature is. You end up having to do a workaround where you move all that stuff away so that signature block comes back up. The other things that we see, and what I'm getting at, is looking at these systems in practical application is where they run into a lot of problems. An example, last advisory group meeting, I asked about a work order. What constitutes a work order? And there's some people that believe the work order's got to say work order on it. But I see in some of the systems it'll say accounting copy, and when you print it out, it says accounting copy and service advisor. And it has time flagged, all the information, just like an old work order. They may have different names, but them understanding to the letter of the law like you guys do is what they need a little bit of guidance sometimes. So that's my point, is sometimes they need a little guidance because they haven't had any interaction with the Bureau. And they think on the surface everything looks fine, but when you get into practical application, it is. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Good to see you, Jerry. Yes, please come forward.
Hello, my name's Elaine Niederhaus. I'm with Crash Champions, and we have about 100 locations in California now, and I've worked quite a bit with Garrett. My question would be is because of our management system, We definitely, we have half that'll write an estimate on the drive before the customer drops off the vehicle, so that's just been taken care of. But the other half, based either on insurance or what have you, we will call up the customer and do an email sending it out, because it's much faster than emailing and trying to get something back. But one of the questions I have, we have like a template that we use because of the name, the number, all the things that you have to have on there. Our management system won't copy and paste our template. So if I'm relying perhaps on our service advisors to put that in, do we have to put the phone number on there, since it's kind of like on the customer tab, it's automatically, because we're just trying to speed up the process, because the customer's going to respond quicker to a text
Sure.
than an email. So is there any wiggle room?
We're referring to the initial estimate of repair?
No, it'd be like supplements, say, for instance.
Okay. So supplements would refer to additional authorizations where it has to have the six, at a minimal, it has to have the 6 things notated, which is the date, the time.
Which will automatically be on our notes.
Right. I would suggest if you have something already pre-filled that you can send them, that they can just type. You're referring to just sending them an email with that?
No, it'd be a text. So our system, you're allowed to text the customer within notes.
Okay.
So, but the phone number is automatically kind of like on the customer tab instead of having to write it out.
If we can identify where the number's coming from, just the same as we can identify an email address,
Okay.
then that would cover the phone number part of it.
Okay.
The important thing with the electronic authorizations when you're getting them by text or social media
Yeah.
is there has to be a unique identifier.
Okay.
And what that means in this case would generally mean a repair order or a work order, whichever you choose, because we want to first identify, was this the repair that was done in January or the repair that we're doing now that we're having these ongoing supplements about. But the other things still fall in line in which you still have to obtain from the consumer by way of text, which is if the phone number's there and we can prove that, that's fine. But the other 5 elements still need to be documented, whether it's just the description of what the additional parts and labor are, the total cost of repair,
Okay.
and who you're speaking with, which would be Mrs. Jones for that particular text conversation. The important thing is the unique identifier, but the 6 elements of documenting additional authorizations still need to be in that text or email.
Okay.
So you can either, kind of train or educate the estimators on how that text needs to be.
I'm trying to open this door.
But, yeah, and text is I probably text 60% of my consumers and most of my complaints nowadays because people just don't answer the phone.
Yeah.
So I know texting has been very, very prevalent in the authorization world. It still needs to meet the requirements, though, that are listed on the additional authorizations as far as those things described and how
Okay.
they're replying to that text. And so with that being said, you can take that text and just forward it by email, print a copy, put it in the file. The acknowledgement statement is still going to apply, where if they've got the 5 or 6 supplements, you can use that signature block. But as long as you can prove, if we're coming out and going over a complaint with you whereby you have supplement 2 or 3 and they're in the way of text, if they're on your phone, at some point you're going to have to transfer it somewhere so it stays with the file. Because if we go to look at this car a year and a half later, therein lies where you're going to have to maintain the records. And where is that text now? So it's however it works for you guys, but it still needs to meet the requirements of what things are listed on the additional authorizations.
Okay. My last question for you then will be also, if we've got an estimate that we got authorized by a customer, and then the insurance company says, no, we're going to have it this way, and there's a supplement now, supplement number 1, based off the insurance company.
Right.
We're not going to get that authorized by the customer yet. We have to lock it, though, for the insurance company purposes, because
Correct.
we know that we're going to add some more stuff. We have not started working on the car. So now it's going to be supplement number 3 with the insurance company because they finally came around. The customer, will we be in trouble because we've got a supplement number 1 that was never authorized? We have the original estimate authorized and supplement number 3, but not number 2. I'm in a situation like that right now.
Okay, so it depends. Were you working initially with the insurance company on the very first estimate? Or was it a written estimate that they got when they came in, and then they went to the insurance?
Yes, and that's what they dropped off, and that's what the customer authorized. We obviously, if there's an insurance company, we're not going to keep on moving forward until we got the okay with the insurance company.
Okay.
But there's certain insurance companies we know that they're going to give us something, and then we've got to prove a point, maybe that might have been bad picture, so the service advisor's going, wait a minute, it's going back and forth. But they had to lock it to send it up to the insurance company.
I think the important thing is just getting an authorization in the first place, whether you
Okay.
guys write it or whether the insurance company comes back and changes it with a bunch of changes. That's simply just explained in a phone call. Hey, you know, that estimate I had you sign for when you dropped off, the insurance company came out, there are some changes, I just want to advise you of what those changes are. I know I had you sign for $2,000, but their initial estimate that a check has been issued off of is going to be for $1,700. So I just want to advise you of that. If you have any questions, I can certainly send you a copy, but you're still treating the obtaining authorization in the same manner.
So we would have to get an authorization for supplement number two?
If there's a change.
If we're not even moving forward with that estimate because we're waiting, because we have to lock it for the insurance company, but we're not going to use it because we know supplement number 3 is the one we're going to end up using. Does that make sense?
Not entirely. Anytime the consumer comes in, you're going to get an estimate of repair, regardless if you wrote it or the insurance wrote it, or if it's going to be a tear down.
Okay.
Ultimately, if everybody knows that the insurance company is paying for it, you're going to wait for their document at some point because the check's going to be issued off of that.
Yes.
So I would assume that the estimator is going to match that estimate first, lock it, whether it's supplement 1 or supplement 2.
Yes.
And the important thing is just keeping in mind, anytime there's a change in repair or an increase in the repair, you have to obtain authorization from the consumer, regardless if the shop wrote it or insurance is supplement 2.
If we're not going to do the repairs based on that supplement until we do the next one, so we're not actually even going to, like, start repairing the vehicle based on what the insurance company said in certain circumstances.
Well, then I would call the insurance company and negotiate the correct way
and that's what we
to
end up
move forward
doing.
on the repair.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
If it's a matter of having that challenge that you don't agree with the repair estimate.
Okay, yes. So, but we have to lock it.
And maybe
to
that's where I
send it
wasn't
out.
following you.
Yeah,
but-
so I just sometimes if you're asking me for paperwork, I can give you, you know, and you're like, okay, well, where's the authorization for supplement number 2? It's like, no, we didn't even start repairing the vehicle then.
Yeah, and we, you know, as far as the field reps, we simplify it. You know, walk us through us. Where's the initial estimate of repair? What did they sign for when they dropped off? So we know what the expectation was.
Okay.
Once we see that, then we go straight to supplement 1. After the tear down, there was a supplement created, whether you guys did it and submitted it, or the insurance did, whatever you're using as that supplement 2, that's what we're looking to see as far as the authorization notes matching that dollar amount.
Okay, perfect.
We don't regulate the insurance companies, we regulate the repair shops. So we're always going to ask for the repair shop's copy.
Okay.
At the end of the day, whatever your negotiations are with the insurance, you know, that's fine, but we want to see the shop's estimates, authorizations, and invoices.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. That was not planned, but it was the best example of how a Write It Right presentation might have a back and forth dialogue between a shop and the bar personnel. So thank you for that discussion. Additional comments or questions? Yes, Caroline. Welcome.
Thank you, Chief DeRay. It's a pleasure to be here again. Great job, Garrett.
Yourself and who you're with, so for the benefit of everyone else. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Carolyn Cocolette. I'm the CEO of Shopware, shop management software. So we provide shop management software to ARDs in California and across the country. I also own my own ARD in San Francisco and have been in operation since 2007. And I'm the most recent past president of ASCCA, so very familiar with Dave Kusa and Jack Molodonoff and the other good folks over there that have been cooperating and collaborating with TAR for years. Thank you, Johan, for the, raising these topics. These are all really important things. And also, is it Jeff or is it Bud? It's Bud. Thank you, Bud, for the request to hear from good feedback from industry on this. I do have a lot of comments on it. I wasn't actually sure whether this workshop today was going to be the right forum for that. So the fact that you sort of invited that feedback is really great. So thank you for that. And I wrote some notes here. I'll try to organize them. The first is that, as many of you know in this room, I have been involved in the process, obviously from the sidelines, but have been very interested in the changes to the regulations, especially around electronic documentation. since before this change actually took place. I'm very familiar with the updated regulations, and I just want to say that I personally agree with the updated regulations. I think the regulations are terrific, and also that, Shopware as a company agrees with those regulations. So there's no debate about whether or not the regulations are appropriate as far as I'm concerned. I do think that it can be challenging to convert the regulations into Write It Right, and there's an inherent process of getting field reps up to speed on how to interpret the regulations. And there's a lot of emphasis on like email and texting, and one of the things that I was very active in trying to explain prior to the updated regs is that there are yet other ways of potentially meeting the regulations without it having to be strictly an email or strictly a text. So just understanding, I think it's very clear at this point what those 6 key components of revised authorizations require. And again, no confusion around that, but I recognize that there's still some learning, and we're still sort of responding to the updated regulations, which is that's inherent whenever you change regulations, especially as it frequently is, can sometimes happen in legislative settings. So anyway, very, very on board with the regulations as a whole. I will also state that the concerns that you're describing, Johan, as far as these various issues that are occurring with some of the existing software companies, or software programs, I should say, Shopware does not have these problems. So I can, sit here representing the fact that software need not have these problems necessarily. And I think that software has an opportunity to do much more than just meet sort of the compliant components of the regs. I think that software has an opportunity to really enable the consumer, enable the shop, and have that be a much more collaborative relationship versus sort of the primary purpose of the regulations is to protect consumers. I would say that software can go beyond protecting consumers and can actually have consumers feel delighted getting their cars fixed and really helped by ARDs, because of course, ARDs are in business to help consumers ultimately and fix their cars, right? They're in the service business. So I'm passionate about how software can go over and above even these baseline requirements that we're describing. That said, no software can guarantee compliance, and I completely agree that you're ultimately going to be discussing compliance with the ARD, and the ARD bears that responsibility. That's because, of course, it's the human, that's the operator using that software that has to either operate it correctly or otherwise be looking out for the consumer's best interest, right? If someone wants to rip off a customer, they're going to be able to do that regardless of what software they're using, and ultimately, ARDs have to take responsibility for those bad actors.
And you make a good point. One of the things that we've always wanted to make sure that the invoices are reflecting is something whereby the consumer understands what they're getting. Mm-hmm. And over the years, obviously, we've had some convoluted, more so on the service side of things, where we see duplicate lines of entry or labor or separation, where we're trying to figure out, is this the diagnosis or is this the actual labor line in which, the charges are taking place? Mm-hmm. But to the comment of the gentleman, where even in this day and age where we have electronic forms, where it's throwing the signature block on like the 3rd page and not even connecting it, I just don't understand why a dealership can't pull a software company to the side and say, well, if you can duplicate the box down here, maybe duplicate it on page 1 or 2, at least it's there and it's being compliant, even though it may be a little cumbersome as far as trying, to find out where everything is. But that's the challenge that I know that they have. Mm-hmm. We're here to tell them just, what it is, what it's going to take to be compliant, what needs to be on these estimates, repair orders, and invoices. But ultimately, the final invoice is what we're looking at when we're going out and inspecting these vehicles. And, that's the most important thing that we hope that they can, at some point, figure out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't take a movie of the repair over, the whole life cycle of a customer's visit, right? And ultimately, that final invoice has to capture those requirements in hindsight. That being said, there's lots of nuance around what actually happened for that consumer from start to finish in terms of their interaction with the software, the interaction with the shop, blah, 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 blah. And I certainly would welcome an opportunity to give a demonstration of some of the things that could be possible throughout the customer's journey to this group or whatever. And I know others have, folks I know in the industry would also welcome that. So there's an opportunity to get into more detail, but understood that the final invoice is the voice of the ARD ultimately, and that has to be appropriate. So my next comment, and this won't be, forever, I will wrap this up. So acknowledging that no software is going to guarantee compliance, I have to admit an approved vendor list, is a great idea. I appreciate that it may be impossible, but I would certainly welcome something like that. And I think such a thing would need to just come with a caveat that using a vendor on this list does not guarantee your compliance, but using a vendor that is not on this list is a greater risk of non-compliance. And I think that's the fine point that you're trying to drive there, and I agree with that. I will say that as a software provider that cares about ARD compliance, that gives my company a competitive advantage in the marketplace over those that may not. And so I do think the free market is going to solve a lot of these problems, and ARDs, or I should say BAR, is not necessarily required to control the free market, obviously not, and so just letting these things sort of make their way and people to make the right decisions long-term for their business will happen. That being said, clearly your point about it's not just one person that's potentially making a mistake, but suddenly all of those invoices are wrong, that's a real problem. That's a multiplication factor in terms of noncompliance that I agree may actually put some undue kind of unfairness with the ARD. So how do we navigate that with cite and fine and so forth? This is very thoughtful. So yeah, those are my comments. Thank you very much for your presentation and all the work.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate the comments. Additional, Mr. Gallo again.
I just wanted to follow up on
There we go. I just wanted to follow up on Caroline's comments because, nothing's better than the free marketplace, and if you invent a better mousetrap, you're going to sell more than those that don't. She gets it because she's a shop owner. She's worked on this software. She understands what the requirements are. But when we look at the point that she made and Bud also made was, having worked with car dealerships and independents, it's one thing if that mistake is being made 12 to 30 times a day on repair orders versus car dealers that are seeing well over 200 vehicles a day, and that problem is being repeated over 200 times a day. That's the concern on why this has to be fixed. And whether working with Jack and the others, it's going to take a legislative effort to do that. I think I understand where Chief DeRay is coming from. He doesn't want to get into the software licensing business. I get that. To Bud's point, if we can have 3 approved vendors that can provide the biometrics that we need for the software to drive the smog check program, then why can't we have a list, to Caroline's point, of these are the software providers that are providing software that is as near to compliant in California as possible, and play at your own risk, because that's really where we're at. Chief DeRay and I know at some point we're both going to go fishing and we're going to retire. They know I'm not kidding. But to that point, the next person that comes in may have a completely different approach to this. And I'm not necessarily a proponent that everything has to get fixed through legislation or regulation. I think if we all roll up our sleeves and figure out a solution, we've done that pretty good over 30 years. So I again applaud the chief for holding this meeting. I was hoping for more companies in the room and on Zoom today, But in the end, it's up to us. We're in the battlefield every day. This is the work we do. And the more that we can do to simplify things that bring us into compliance, it's better off for the consumer, it's better off for the Bureau, and it's better off for the business. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Moderator, do we have any hands raised or public comments that have come in through that WebEx?
Thank you. We did have a couple of raised hands. They've been lowered, so let's see if they will.
My apologies.
That's okay. We'll see if they raise them back up. They were raised when it was asked if there were tech industry people attending. So the Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to type comment, send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, we have a Mike Flanagan. Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted.
Chief DeRay, how are you this afternoon, sir?
Doing well, thank you, Mike. Good to hear your voice, and
thank you.
Happy to have you here.
I understand you met Ryan yesterday. Thank you. I just think this.
Having a little trouble hearing you, Mike, and I'm not sure if it's.
Turn it up. I think, Pat, the issue is a legislative issue. We in California have so many California requirement mandates. This shouldn't be put on you. It needs to be brought to the legislature if how burning the issue is. So that's all I had to say. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mike. As I said, we did highlight it for the legislature's attention as they're looking at our sunset review report.
All right, I don't see any
additional questions or comments. Moderator, any other comments coming
I don't
through
see
on the WebEx?
I don't see any additional requests for comment.
Okay. Any other comments from the folks in the room here? All right.
Bashful.
All right. Well, stay tuned. We are just scratching the surface, I'm sure, on this issue, and I think we'll probably wait to see how the legislature may want to address this. As I said, we've put it before them, and this is our first attempt to gather the parties. I think there's probably greater participation would be hopeful for the next iteration of a workshop or meeting assembling the various stakeholders. So we'll look to reconvene maybe after we hear back from, as a response to the issues that have been presented in our sunset report, and if this is something the legislature is going to address or not, or if they choose not to, we'll look at doing further education through meetings like this as the year progresses. And I don't have any other thoughts or comments at this time. We'll look to adjourn the meeting. Anything else? Nothing for the good of the order? Okay. It is now, thank you for everyone who attended and participated in today's workshop. Garrett, great job with the presentation. Appreciate you stepping forward to do this one. And please, we encourage, for those who are listening in, anyone who's interested in a Right at Right presentation, please give us a call. Garrett gave his contact information. You can always ask it through the executive office, my office, anyone you happen to come across in the Bureau of Automotive Repair. Just put that request forward and we'd be happy to do it. We want compliance, right? That's the name of the game here. If we can help get there in a proactive, educational manner, we're always, I think both parties, both bar and the industry, and ultimately the consumer are better served. So with having said that, thank you to the moderator, Tricia, Bryce, thank you for your assistance. Gazak, thank you for your assistance. We are adjourning 15 minutes early, 3:15 p.m. Thank you. Have a good day and a good rest of the week.